everyone, and welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about Hometown Melody by Milla Holt. So, this one is a contemporary Christian romance, so it sits within the Christian fiction genre. And it's also the first book in a new series that Milla has that's called Rhapsody of Grace. So, why did I want to read this one? Well, I've enjoyed the books I've read in the past by Milla. She's an English author who has written books in Africa, Scandinavia, and as I said, this one's in England. And I was just intrigued by the premise for this book as well, which I'll tell you about soon. So I purchased this ebook and also the second book in the series directly from Milla Holt's online store, and I'll add a link to that in the show notes as well. So let's talk about the book. Hometown Melody by Milla Holt is set in England, and I think we're in the countryside in the southeastern part of the country, but don't quote me on that 100%. My English geography is not fantastic. And in this one, we have quite a few romance tropes. So we have a musician celebrity hero in the story. He's in a Christian band. We have a single mum who's financially struggling with her son. We have characters that are from completely different worlds. We have the wealthy world of our hero, and we have the struggle street world of our heroine in this one. And we have a secret baby, which is a trope that with contemporaries, I either love it or I hate it usually. And I loved it in this book, and I will soon tell you why. So the first line in this one is, "There she comes, Supermum herself." And that really does describe Adria at the beginning of the book. So she's young, she'd be in her early 20s, and she hasn't had an easy life. She's got her son Owen, who's 22 months old, and his father isn't in the picture. She also works overnight in fast food, flipping burgers, and her best friend, who also has a toddler and is expecting her second child with her husband, babysits her son overnight while she works. Now, Adria herself was raised by a single parent, so she didn't know her own father. Her mum sadly passed away when she was a teenager, and she was in foster care for the last couple of years at school. And she ended up not finishing school. So she doesn't really have a lot of options to make money because she just doesn't have the educational qualifications or had the opportunities to gain an education to improve her lot in life. And she lives in what's commonly known as the projects. So it's government housing estates that you'll find in different parts of England. And I immediately, when I started reading the first chapter, thought of the TV show The Bill, which was very popular in the 80s and 90s. I think it ran for about 20 odd years in total. And the setting was just, yeah, I could just see it in my mind. And the way the bill worked, it was a police procedural, and there'd be the detectives in one episode and the uniform policeman in the next episode. They used to be back-to-back episodes, and they'd often end up in the projects because the projects were a place that wasn't necessarily safe to live and wasn't a comfortable place to live. And many of the people who were living there were being supported by welfare from the government. And she's living in a rundown flat. She has mold issues. It's really not a pleasant place. The playground where her son plays is run down and not particularly safe. There's a lot of unsavory people that live around there, and Adria would do anything to get out. She's just totally over having to bring her son into the world in a place that isn't necessarily safe. And then we have Levi, who's our hero. So he's also in his 20s, and he's a celebrity due to the fact that his Christian band with his brothers has taken off and been successful. So he's also a worship leader at church, and he's had some solo success as well as doing the band with his brothers. And they're currently working on their next album, and he's in a pretty financially secure spot. There was a point in time when his family were looking down the barrel at bankruptcy, but that is now over and things are looking pretty good. So we end up very close to the start of the story with Adria's got some stuff happening where she lives that is making it very unsafe for her to stay. So she goes and contacts a lawyer to see if she can get child support. So she tried to reach out to Levi, and had no success and had left it. But now she's got to a point where things are becoming a bit desperate and she really does need to seek him out. Because ideally, she'd like to move into a private rental and get away from the environment that she's in the public housing estate. And then we have Levi, he gets a letter from her lawyer and is like shocked that he has a secret son. And the situation where he met Adria was the biggest mistake of his life. And he's tried to pretend it hasn't happened. He's tried to hide it, move on, forget about it. But his lapse in moral judgment is now coming back to haunt him big time because he's found out that he may have a son, it blows his mind and just blows his world apart. So the meet cute in this one is very intense because it's not just Adria and Levi seeing each other again for the first time in 3 odd years. It's the first time that Levi will be meeting his son. So there's a lot of emotion that goes into the meet cute for this one. And so this romance story, there are so many problems. And the secret baby trope, by definition, will always bring issues. And I really appreciated how Miller set up the circumstances surrounding why Owen's birth and existence was kept a secret, because often that's where I'll get lost in the story and decide to DNF it because I just don't quite believe that it's plausible. But in this one, it made perfect sense and it really works. So I really appreciated how the secret baby plot played out. So we have Owen, who is just the most adorable 22-month-old. He's so cute. And we have so much emotional baggage that his parents have. And it also flips onto the family as well in terms of his brothers, and the whole impact of him having a son has massive ramifications because they're in a business arrangement as a band. There's a Christian band and there's problems in terms of their image that come along with that as well because they're high profile and Christian. So the themes that come up in this book is there are redemption themes, there are forgiveness themes, and also I'd call it a theme of what I call authenticity. So the characters really were forced to genuinely look at the decisions they'd made in the past. And if they needed to repent, then they would go down that road and not just fob it off and not just pretend it didn't happen and not just take it seriously, but there was a real authenticity and a real genuine way that the characters approached what was happening in the story. And I really loved the genuine repentance that we would see. So there were so many things to love about this book. So I wasn't planning to read this one quickly, but I ended up reading it in less than 24 hours because I started reading chapter 1 and I just couldn't put it down. I just kept going and kept going. And thankfully, I actually had a chunk of time to read it, or I would have been very frustrated having to go back to the story. And as I said, Owen is just adorable. And I loved how Levi and Adria, in the decisions they made, and they didn't make perfect decisions because no one does. And they were under a lot of pressure for a whole lot of different reasons. But their heart really was to prioritize Owen and his welfare. And I just loved how that happened in the story. And it wasn't a situation where there was a toxic parent who was using their child as a weapon and all that kind of drama. None of that was in the story. We had two genuine people who had made unwise decisions who then needed to come together and work out what to do. And they were also dealing with an attraction that was underlying all the way through the story, because of course it's a romance. And I also particularly loved with the side characters, Levi's mum. She was just amazing. I thought, oh my goodness, Adria really did well to pick up her in the story because she was someone who was a cheerleader for Adria and she supported Adria and she didn't need to do a whole lot of stuff that she did. She went out of her way to be helpful. And I just loved her character in the story. That's Levi's mum. And the other thing I really loved is how Levi was a worship leader at church. So that meant that what had happened in the past, being high profile, was impacting what he was doing at the church. And I really loved how he was sitting down with the pastor and working through some pretty big issues. And at the same time, I really appreciated how the church community supported him and supported his family and didn't get all judgy and horrible, but were actually there for them. And it was more a case of, okay, how can we help? Not how can we judge you? And I loved that aspect of the story as well. So, in terms of my favorite book quote, it's this one. Sometimes, very often, in fact, God deals with things in stages. We get to grips with one issue and then he brings something else to light. And that quote really sums up the faith elements in the story. And I'd call this one a story that has strong faith elements because both Adria and Levi had a very distinct faith arc and the spiritual journey in the story. And Adria's faith journey was just beautiful in terms of how that played out. And Levi was really challenged by dealing with things that had happened in the past. And it wasn't just the circumstances around how Owen came into existence, which was Adria was staying at Levi's friend's house. She was house minding, and Levi turned up unexpectedly, so they weren't supposed to be in the same place. And one thing led to another, and then he worked out what he did, and he panicked, and he ran away and hid it and pretended it didn't happen. And so he really had to deal with not the fact that of what he did in terms of having a son now, but also the consequences of having hidden what had happened. Because if he had have stayed in contact with Adria and hadn't have taken off, then he wouldn't have a secret baby. He would have known about his son and would have had an opportunity to be involved in his life at a younger age, et cetera, et cetera. So I really liked how those things were explored in the story as well. So this one is part of a series. I'd recommend starting with book one because book one is fabulous. So I do read series out of order, and being a romance, they're standalone stories, so you can read them out of order and cherry pick what you want. But this is definitely a good place to start with Milla's series. So, in summary, I recommend this book to readers who like secret baby stories where there's high plausibility in terms of how the secret baby plot works in the book. I also recommend it to people who like different world stories. So we have a wealthy hero and we have a heroine who's really struggling to make ends meet and has really had a difficult start in life. We have musician characters, and so the music aspect of the story was fun as well. We have an absolutely adorable toddler who you will fall in love with because Owen is so cute. We have a charming English setting in the countryside, and it was just so nice to go to England. And Milla, being English herself, has written that setting with such authenticity, and I love that as well. And it has a really strong faith element in the story with both of the main characters having their own faith journey. And I absolutely love that about the story. Thank you for joining me today. Does Hometown Melody sound like a book that you'd like to read? Or have you already read it? Or have you read the second book in the series? What did you think? You can let me know. If you're listening on the podcast, you can send me a text via the link in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the episode and leave a comment at YouTube. You can also email me via the contact form at my website at narelleatkins.com. If you've enjoyed watching this episode, please subscribe at your favorite podcasting app or subscribe at YouTube. And if you've enjoyed this one, please share it with a friend who you think would like reading Milla Holt's books and someone who enjoys contemporary Christian romance. The links I've mentioned will be in the show notes. Thank you for tuning in today and see you next time.